Welcome back, everyone. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn, bringing you yet another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course, the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Joseph Martens, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest to you. With us today is Kayne McGladrey. Kayne is the CISO-in-Residence. There he is, CISO-in-Residence at HyperProof. Before that, he's been in CISO and other tech executive roles in other companies such as Ascent Solutions, Pensa Development, and Integral Partners. He's also recognized by Thinkers 360 as the #1 worldwide thought leader for cybersecurity and risk management. You're shaking your head there, or you're nodding, you're rolling your eyes, but it's true. It's such a brilliant accomplishment, Kayne, and we're thrilled to have him with us today here on our podcast. Kayne, it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me on, Joseph. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and I'm glad that I know you've been moving. I'm glad you've got a consistent visual backdrop again.
I'm still working on it. I know I have these questionable images behind me, but the move just hasn't allowed me to set it up properly. But I like your background. That's much more awesome.
Thank
Now,
you.
worldwide thought leader on topics that we are not going to talk about, Kayne, because our topic is leadership, of course. We want to talk about your leadership journey, what you've learned, what some aha moments, surprises were. Let's start with maybe your reflection on your journey. Super successful, where you are, what you've accomplished. When you think about that, what do you think are the ingredients for that success? What got you to where you are?
I think intellectual curiosity is something that we all need professionally, regardless of our career. And that needs to be combined with a level of skepticism, especially right now in our, how would an AI phrase this sentence, our emerging navigating AI landscape, right? There just ain't nothing like an AI mansplaining to you how to do something and then doubling down when it's wrong. And I think that the ability to be curious enough to know to ask questions and be skeptical is really essential, especially for business leaders these days, because there are a lot of claims being made, there are a lot of assertions being made, and we're working in an incredibly noisy media environment currently where there are a lot of actors participating in these conversations that all have different motives. Some of them might be profit-driven motive. Buy our thing, it'll make your activity better. Or it might be misinformation based, like don't do anything because it's too hard to make a decision. Or there might be macroeconomic triggers as well that are being reported on from varying things. And for CISOs like myself, all of that just has to be part of the daily ingest of things that we take into consideration for what's going on and how we can help organizations better respond.
Yeah. So being skeptical, asking questions, is that something that you discovered at some point? Was there some experience that led you to that? Or is that the mindset that you brought to the game?
Well, this has been thoroughly documented everywhere, but I'm a theater kid. Theater kids, I don't think, are naturally skeptical. Right? I mean, if I'd had some skepticism, I would have, before age 18, realized I was not going to end up singing and dancing on Broadway, although I do still enjoy going to shows there. And I'm blessed to have had 3 really good mentors over the course of my career who really imbued in me those values of intellectual curiosity and taking the time to ask questions. And then I think the other thing that's really influenced my worldview is an extensive amount of time spent traveling to different cultures and understanding that making values-based assertions about motive is typically incorrect. And you have to think about like how others see the world. Again, there's a lot of this, I'll oversimplify this part. China is bad because they're doing insert thing here from a cybersecurity perspective. And from their perspective, they're not bad at all. It's some government employees sitting in their office doing their day job. And I don't think that categorizing them and using negative language necessarily helps the conversation. I think that in this point of time, many of us have very specialized roles, and it's very helpful to take other people's perspectives. Back when I used to run worldwide professional services at a company called Centrify Corporation, one of the things I always encouraged my team to do was to go work in other parts of the business. So don't just think you're going to show up and be a consultant and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And no, go work the help desk for a while.
Go
See
some
what
other
that's like.
places.
Go
Yeah.
hang out with the marketing team for a while. See what that's like. Go
Yeah.
work in engineering for a while, because it helps to build empathy, and also it helps to build understanding of a different set of perspectives. So it gives a more well-rounded approach rather than a myopic approach.
Yeah, I've got the solution for exactly one thing. Yeah, you mentioned your mentors already. Let me stay on that point for a moment. What was some advice that you got from your mentors that was meaningful to you? When you think of the various people that you had following your journey or being partners in your journey, being at your side in your journey, what is something that stuck with you?
I can't quote verbatim, but I'll paraphrase a couple of them. One of them was quite concise and gave me quite some very, I guess other people would see it as negative feedback, and I think it's necessary to get that feedback about ourselves. And the feedback came along the line of, Kayne, I see you're a really smart person. People think you're talking down to them. We're good, bad, or indifferent, whatever I thought I was doing, right? People thought I was talking down to them, and I've been blessed to have had that feedback of maintaining my tone and also being respectful of people's experiences as they come into a conversation. And combine that with some of the media training that I've had, thanks to my membership in the IEEE, actually, as where I'm one of their spokespeople for cybersecurity, actually, really has given me that ability, I think, to convey information appropriate to the people who will be receiving the information. And I think that that's something that, again, gets lost, especially a lot of first-time CISOs and senior cybersecurity leaders who come up from a technical background are all very smart, very technical people. And as soon as they engage with people from outside of their sphere, the struggle is real. So that's the first part, really, is just being mindful of how others see you and trying to empathize with their point of view. I think the second big learning point that I had, I'm trying to think of how to best phrase this one. I'm rummaging around in my memory.
No, I'm
here,
curious.
Yeah.
That's quite the lead up.
I guess it's, again, it's a side effect of having been in consulting.
Okay.
I think that's the best way that I can say this one, in that because I see something as a priority doesn't mean it's a priority for everyone. And if you're giving a executive presentation to the board of directors for a Fortune 2 company, one of the top 2 companies, and you show up with a proposal and here's what we think you should do, you have to be willing to go into that conversation with no ego, and willing to go into that conversation fully understanding they might take that proposal and put it up on the shelf and go, yep, that's a proposal. Not important for us to go solve right now. And I think that, again, that's having that ability to say, this is my team's best work, the team that I'm representing, or perhaps this is my own best individual spin on it, and not having, you have pride of authorship, but not necessarily you have the conviction to stand for it, but you have to be willing to let it go.
So I hear a certain detachment. That's how that lands on me. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you have to be willing to say,
but detached.
Yes, this is based on the information that I have been presented. This is correct. That doesn't mean that it's right. And there's a big difference between those two, because it's very possible for something to be factually correct. The risk management program that your company has is missing these things, right, from a third-party risk management or something like that. But that doesn't mean that the company's going to go action on it. And sometimes, I think the third lesson actually I have is having kids taught me I can't make other people's mistakes for them. At some point, you do have to let go. And again, when you are making recommendations, whether it's to the board, whether it's to senior executives, whether it's to their team members, we have to be willing to say, this is my perspective. I'm sure there are others' perspectives. And, if you don't want to say, I told you so, because nobody wants to be that person and nobody likes that person at parties. But we have to have that understanding that sometimes it takes those unfortunate side effects to people to go, oh, we should pull that proposal back down from the shelf.
Yeah. Let me take another look at your leadership journey from a different perspective. What were some aha moments that you experienced? At what stage did something maybe happen that was very different from what you expected? You had a certain idea when you reached a certain level and it turned out being completely different.
It's almost a joke that I've made before. I have a CISSP. CISSP is a recognized certification from ISC2. It is a big exam to prepare for. It is a big deal to get. It is a industry recognized certification. The funny thing that I and a lot of my CISO friends talk about, all of us have CISSPs, or at least the preponderance do. It doesn't actually reflect the work that gets done at times. I think a lot of the work that CISOs end up doing is unfamiliar. We don't get told, hey, you're going to be spending a lot of your time looking at contracts. You're going to have to be an expert in contractual law, or you're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to convey your company's security stance to other vendors in very long, very tiresome questionnaires. I think that's another one of those things that was an aha moment of, oh, there's actually more depth here. And those various boot camps and online things that say, hey, you can learn how to be a CISO. I think they're missing a few of those key steps. I think that's one of those. I think another one was, again, a lot of my time is spent in risk management. Classically speaking, many of us have dealt with risk management in a commercial sense, and I have the experience of having worked in a defense industrial based sense. And typically companies will say, well, our top risk here, for example, is we don't want a big financial loss because of a regulatory investigation due to a breach of a contract or a breach of a law or something like that. So you say, that's not okay. And that's the number one thing in the risk register. I was working with a firm where in the defense industrial base where loss of human life was the number one thing. And I can tell you that is an upsetting conversation to have a risk exercise over how many people is it okay get grievously injured or die as a consequence of us taking on a project? And I remember going back to that in some cases and saying, cool, we can't put this project, if we take this contract, we can't put it in a major metropolitan city because of potential issues resulting if the project doesn't turn out well. That's a real pivot there. I saw it again when I was working with construction companies where, again, it's a very vastly different perspective and culture where their safety is everything. And you think of like people working at a job site, of course, they're going to have a daily safety stand-up meeting. One of my clients years ago had a daily safety stand-up meeting at their executive headquarters. Every day, they just have a safety, because it's what you do if you're in that industry. And I think that the advantage of seeing these different approaches towards what people consider to be risks and what they consider to be threats continues to influence how I lead and how I interact with others and how I try to give folks a more well-rounded view rather than again, this like, oh, it's all technology risk. It's all people in hoodies from Russia doing bad things, which is patently false. They're certainly an interesting feature of the landscape, but they are certainly not the only thing folks worry about.
Yeah, that's a great illustration there. Yeah. But nice aha moments that are in there. They're learning moments. And what I hear in there is really to look for as many different experiences as possible, to expose yourself to a variety of these experiences so that you have a chance to pick those up. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that for folks, regardless of where they are in their career, having humility and being willing and able to work in parts of the business that you previously have not, I think is a really valuable lesson learned, both for empathy, but also for shaping our perspectives. Obviously, you can't, if you don't have a law degree, you can't go work in the legal office. And obviously,
Mm.
if you don't have
Yeah.
an HR background, you probably shouldn't be in HR. But beyond that, the rest of it, we should,
Yeah.
at a minimum, make friends with all of those folks. And maximally, if you have the opportunity earlier in your career to get exposure to that,
Yeah.
absolutely do that.
That's a great exercise to ask the question, which department would I be able to contribute to, or where can I learn most from? That's a
Yeah.
nice suggestion. We talked about your past leadership journey, Kayne. Let's take a look at today. Again, not a question about positions, companies, products, projects, or anything like that, just about your journey. When you think about where you are today, what's an area where you feel you want to focus on right now in terms of your own growth, in terms of your development? What's an area where you say, if I pay attention to this, if I work on this, if I put focus on this, that's my best chance to level up, to achieve my next iteration, my next evolution?
I might think of that differently, actually. I think the story's been less about me and it's more about what I can do for other folks. And having been in cybersecurity so long,
Okay.
I have this imperative to give back to the community that has welcomed me and treated me well for so many years. Something that I'm actively working to finish. Uh, Many folks have written books. Many folks have self-published those books, and I hear that
Mm-hmm.
that's been a great thing. I've been working on a book for 2.5 years now. I'm working with finally a publisher on the
Mm-hmm.
book. I would say to anybody who's thinking of trying to write a book, I have done multinational mergers and acquisitions investigations before across languages, and that's a lot easier than writing a book. Now, I'm sure it's probably easier if you just say, hey there, large language model, like write me a book, it'll be cool. But if you actually take the time and try to be thoughtful and use empathy when you're trying to write a book for a broad business audience, that is a very hard thing to do, as
Yeah.
I've learned firsthand. I've also learned that if I ever do this again, apparently Notepad is not what people write their books in. Um, I was just like, cool. I can't have a typewriter, but I have a mechanical keyboard and Notepad, and that's great. And I'm trying to do that mostly a way of sharing the knowledge that I have with a larger audience than I currently serve.
Okay. How close are you to the
Um,
publication?
Ooh, buddy.
Do you want to venture a guess there?
Oh, I think it's going to be in the next year. Right now, what I'm doing is taking the book apart again and figuring out
Wow.
which components of this uh, are core and need to be part of the book and which parts are going to be a downloadable exercise.
Okay.
Something I spent a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time doing was executive advisory. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're wondering how to do something in
Mm-hmm.
consulting, obviously, like we do workshops. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big popular thing. And I thought, okay, well, let's enrich the material with workshops. Turns
Mm-hmm.
out if you add workshops to a book, they add pages to a book, and there's a limit on how many
Yeah.
pages you should apparently have in a book. Again, lessons learned as I'm going through this. Yeah, so I think it'll come out in the next year, but I wouldn't predict that to be a hard number.
Okay.
It
Got
has
it.
been a real learning experience and a real
Mm,
journey.
yeah. It sounds like it. Let's take a look into the future. I know we don't have a perfect crystal ball. I know the future is always murky. But if we were to have this conversation, let's say in 3 years again, and we're reflecting on what has happened since, what do you think is the difference then? What do you think might have changed about your leadership, about leadership in general? What do you think are the evolutions, the changes that are happening?
I think right now we're at a very interesting inflection point when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence as leaders. And I've read, there's a MIT survey that I just read. There's a couple McKinsey surveys that I just read around how leaders are thinking about artificial intelligence. And some leaders like CFOs and CEOs right now in August of 2025 are having some skepticism over the possible growth of use of AI and the benefits associated with it, whereas chief HR officers and similar are seeing some benefits associated with it. I think that as leaders, we need to be curious and we need to look at what this is potentially good for. I think we need to think about what are some instances where we would not want to use AI. And I think that's going to be the big shakeout in the next 3 years, possibly faster, of what is the limit of
Hmm.
what an AI can do versus what it should do. And a lot of this I end up thinking about attorney-client privilege, which again, I love me some boring topics, and that's one of them. And if you are a business leader and you are strategizing with your best friend, your LLM or your agentic AI, and you're typing stuff in, that's probably subject to discovery. And we haven't had any jurisprudence on this or any court cases on this saying what happens if an executive's conversation with an AI comes up in court. How's that going to go? Nobody knows right now. I think we're going to see that, and I think that's going to inform some of the directionality. I think the other thing is that when our laws and the majority of our regulations, at least in the domestic United States, but also in other parts of the world, were written, AI wasn't a thing. Like we didn't have AI when we had Sarbanes-Oxley come out in 2002. That just wasn't a consideration. And I've yet to meet a CEO who'd say, yeah, I'll let an AI write my 10K. I'll let it verify my 10K because they have a material personal risk associated with that. I
Hmm.
think that's going to be something that we see shaking out of, again, what are the factual things that we can do? And having that skepticism, I think, again, is so
Hmm.
necessary because as we've seen, AIs tend to, well, they tell you what you want to hear. They tell you you're doing a really good job of it and it was a really great question, not necessarily a fact-based approach. And um, I think that's something that's getting lost in the
Yeah.
noise right now.
Yeah. Like you said at the beginning, right? They also double down on a wrong answer that might be there. Even though you could argue, isn't that human as well? Don't people do that all the time too?
That is very
But
true.
nonetheless, let me ask you one more question, Kayne, and then we'll wrap it up. When you look at peers, when you look at other tech executives that are out there, what's something where you think they could do something differently? Or you see something that's maybe a pattern of not quite working the way you think it should work? And what advice would you give them?
I'd say, and it comes down to a trifecta of individuals, and it's the CISO, the chief people or chief HR officer, and then legal. And something that I see quite regularly is new people entering the cybersecurity workforce, which again is my domain experience, and they have all the right things. They have the background, they've got the skills, they've got
Mm-hmm.
maybe a bachelor's degree, and they can't find work because the CISO has said, "Hey, we need a level one analyst."
Mm-hmm.
And the legal officer has said, well, here are the criteria that we think is important for this role. And HR has said, here's what the ideal candidate is for this role. And that's where things immediately fall over because the CISO they just want a little guy who they can train, like somebody who's new, who can come into the workforce and do their thing and learn how to do it. And when we over rotate into an abundance of certification acronym soup or all of these technologies, I think that really makes it hard for new
Mm-hmm.
graduates to find work. And the other risk I see associated with that is I had a friend of mine, former Air Force, who used to run red teams, and he'd look at job listings for companies that they were targeting. And you can find out a heck of a lot about, like when your company's tech stack says you're using Oracle and you're using IBM and you're
Mm-hmm.
using Slack, if you need to figure out how are you going to run adversarial operations against them, you just go read their job board. And I think that produces, again, an unexpected consequence. I think that ultimately that CISO, that's chief people officer or chief HR officer in legal need to talk about what's realistic and being willing to accept trade-offs is necessary. And I think the companies that are
Yeah.
doing that well are able to hire and promote from within, and the companies that are saying, well, you have to be in our office from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. and here's our dress code. For folks who are highly technical and often find themselves working at 2 a.m. in the morning on incidents that are unpleasant as heck, that's not the mental model they come from. And again, that's a cultural bridge that we have to either accept, or we have to say, cool, maybe we should just outsource that function because culturally our company is not prepared to do that.
Interesting. Then the solution is there as well, right? You don't have to have the cultural fit anymore. Got it.
Exactly.
Kayne, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. One thing that will really stick with me are the wonderful analogies that you made. I will think of hoodies, of Chinese, and all of the other analogies that we bubbled through. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much, Kayne.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. To everyone else out there, please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And most importantly, join us again for the next podcast. Until then, keep your brain cells active.